Hey guys, I thought it'd be fun to do a walk cycle in Flash, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of make my own character to do this. So I've built this little goon file, and the first thing I'm going to do before get rolling here is I'm actually going to save this as a different document. The artwork is done in Flash, so instead of messing up the document with the artwork, I'm just going to go ahead and save this out. And I'll just do this as goon assembled. And the purpose of what I want to show you to do today is, first of all, just how to set up a character for a walk cycle for rigging. It depends on how articulate you want the character to be. When you look at these different parts here, I'll go ahead and open this up so we can look at all the layers. What I've done is I've built these layers out, the different parts, the drawing parts on different layers. I started with a sketch just on a single layer, and then I just started building my own layers and drawing them out. As you build these guys, let me zoom in a little bit. You can see that each part has kind of the stroke around the edge, and then what I did is I just got out the paintbrush tool and I just painted a little bit more of the fill over the stroke area, so that when the leg is turning, so if we look at, sorry, let me turn this guy on, wrong thing, sorry, there we go. If we look at this, you'll notice that when the lower leg turns, the lower leg's going to be able to articulate with the thigh. So here's the lower leg. Just imagine it bending. It's going to bend around with the thigh. So if you're building your own pieces and you have strokes and fills, I just suggest having a little bit extra on the edges. So let's look at a couple of these other guys. So for example, here's the top of the thigh and the hip. Notice that the hip is in front of this back leg so that it can articulate around behind the hip. And then the right thigh comes in front of the hip so that it'll be able to articulate there. But that's basically what there is to it. There's a little bit of extra fill, and that's it. So I went through the process of making all of these. Pardon me. And as we look at the shapes, it's not that big of a deal. There's a head, there's a neck. So notice that I didn't make any special shapes for eyes or any of that. All this guy's going to do is lurch across the screen. So one thing you should do when you're starting out is to figure out what you want the character to be doing. One suggestion I have for you too is don't try to make one character do everything. You can do one set of drawings for a character doing a walk cycle, and then you can, if you have one where you need to zoom in close on his face and have him do all these expressive emotions, you can have another symbol representing that character as a close-up. So this is just purely for a little walk cycle. I was thinking about it. I would really like to be able to have the foot articulate, but you'll notice that the feet right now as they stand, I just have them kind of doing their own thing. So I'd like the ball of the foot down the road to be able to bend and compared to where the ankle is. But right now, I'm just going to stick with the ankle pivoting. So you could make this more expressive if you wanted. You could also draw different graphic representations for the hand. So if the hand needed to flex and do these different things, you could do that as well. But I'm not going to get into that with this video. All I want to do with this particular video is go through rigging the character. So if you were to draw this in Illustrator or in Photoshop, I would just suggest making the different elements on separate layers. So and again, the different layers are going to just be for what you want to move around. You know, to be honest, the neck and the torso in my animation is not going to differentiate, but you might do that. Some people will actually break out the upper body or the upper torso from the lower torso in case you wanted him to bend or flex or do that kind of stuff. So you break the character out into the different parts. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to convert the different parts to a symbol. Each one's going to become a graphic symbol, just so that I can articulate them and tween them. Remember, if you don't have symbols, you can't do motion tweens with them, so I want to go through that process here. So I'm going to just click on the keyframe for each one of these guys, modify, convert to symbol, or F8, name these something that makes sense. And then I'm going to also adjust the pivot point as I go too. So I'm getting the free transform tool, and I'm going to just move the pivot point to where I want it to pivot. So if I want him to move around here, I can now have him pivot his head along his neck. That makes sense. So I'm going to do that for each one of these. So neck, again, convert to symbol. And again, all I'm doing is I'm clicking on the frame. That selects all of the items on the frame. This is especially important if you're bringing in an Illustrator graphic and you want to take the Illustrator graphic and convert it into symbols. If you just try to select the different parts on a frame, you might not get all of the parts. So instead, the easy thing is to just select the frame. It'll select all the parts. And again, I'm going to just move these pivot points while I think about it. You want to move the pivot points ahead of time so that you don't have to worry about this down the road. The problem down the road, if you decide to move your pivot points and you've already done lots of tweening, is your pivot is going to go through a change. So all of your tweens get messed up. So set your pivot points on the first frame anyway. Okay, so I'm just going to continue through here. And the key thing I want you to get from this is the fact that I'm moving these pivots as I go. Name your symbols something that makes sense. And the pivot should go where you want it to rotate. So for example, if I take the whole arm now, it's a series of symbols. I'm going to take the pivot point that now works with the whole free transform. And notice I can take that. I can then select the arm and the hand. If I can select the hand here, there we go. Move its pivot over to the elbow, etc. You can see here I have some cleanup to do, but that's essentially what you're shooting for. We're converting all these points just so that we're going to be able to move this body around. And you know what, I'm going to not make you watch going through this whole thing. It's all the same thing. I'm clicking on a keyframe, converting to symbol, naming the layer. I'm going to pause this video and come back once it's all set up. Alright, so I've converted everything into symbols. If I click around, you'll notice as I'm clicking in the properties, it tells me what the symbols are. I've named them all. I've adjusted their pivot points. So as I'm clicking around, I should be able to double check those. Now I have a suspicion that one of the symbols, my left lower leg, I think it still has some other drawing stuff in it. So we might have to go back and look at that. Left calf, sorry. Might have some drawing stuff in there too. So we'll have to check that in a second. But now I've got this issue, okay? Everything's converted into a symbol, but I want this to be inside of a graphic. I'm going to do a little walk cycle, and I want the graphic to just do the cycle. Then I can just tween the graphic across the stage to have the guy actually walk across the stage. This gives me a couple of advantages. If I build a graphic of the guy walking, I can scale a whole bunch of them. So if I want a bunch of zombies rather than just one, I can just drag out a bunch of different zombies onto the stage. So that's kind of a nice thing to consider. So how do I get there? Now, if I had drawn this inside of a graphic to begin with, that would have taken care of this. But I can easily transfer this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click on the top layer, hold down Shift, click on the bottom layer. I'm going to make sure there's no little elevator here, so I know I have everything selected in my layers. I'm going to right click, and I'm just going to choose Cut Layers. So it just gives me an empty layer 1. Now I'm going to go to choose Insert, New Symbol, and I'm going to name this Goon. And this is where we do the walk cycle. I'm going to zoom back a little. Well, you'll see here in a second. Now I'm going to right click and choose Paste Layers. All the layers come in here. I'm going to go ahead and move them over, and I'm going to get them lined up so that they line up to that registration. So his top left part is aligned with the registration mark. And that's not critical. The registration can be anywhere. But if we're putting him on the stage, that's where the 0, 0 position is for X and Y coordinates. It registers from this mark. So in some cases, you might want that to be the middle of the guy. Right now, I'm going to just leave it here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that extra layer. Notice layer 1 still hanging around here. So I'm going to delete that. And now we have this goon. If I go back to scene 1, notice he's not there. We'll drop him back into the scene. Over here in library, notice there's my goon. And he's made up of all these different parts. So if I drag him over and drop him in, there he is. Now so far, nothing's really happening with him. I'm going to just scale him down just so you can kind of see what happens here. And heck, I'll just lay in a little ground for him to walk on. We'll call it ground. Ground. There we go. Again, I apologize for my cold. We'll just put in a little black rectangle. Black, not green. Let me get this out. Just want to choose a color. How about kind of swampy? There we go. All right, so we've got the ground in here, and I'm going to tween this guy. I'll go ahead and call him Goon. The layer that he's on, Goon. I'm just going to create a motion tween. And I'll just stretch it out, frame 65, sure. And I'll have the ground go the same distance, so I'm going to just press F5. Now the ground goes the entire way. But back to our goon here. On that layer, I'm going to just move him to the end. Not very much walk cycle there, right? It's just rolling by. He's just sliding along. So in the next movie, we're going to actually get him so that he starts moving. But I want to stress the idea of we've got this movie inside of a movie. Actually, we've got graphics, and inside of this graphic clip, I'm going to have a walk cycle. So we'll do all of our editing from this point on inside of the graphic. Or I should say 90% of the editing. So I'm going to go ahead and save the file, open up our graphic here, and we'll zoom in and we'll work on that in the next movie. Thanks.